The first laugh echoed across the alien fleet before the human ship even finished exiting hyperspace. It was a sharp, clicking sound, carried through hundreds of command bridges at once. A single vessel. Small. Old-looking. Alone. Against an armada that had erased civilizations from star maps. In that moment, no one in the Caro's dominion believed history was about to change. The human ship drifted forward, engines quiet, hull scarred and dark. It did not maneuver into a defensive formation. It did not call for allies. It did not retreat. It simply arrived, like it had been invited. Supreme Marshal Kethrax watched the display from his throne bridge, his long talons resting calmly on the armrests carved from living crystal. He had commanded extermination campaigns for nearly 4 centuries. He knew fear when he saw it. This ship showed none. "Confirm scan," he ordered, his voice deep and bored. "Confirmed," replied the sensor master. "Single human vessel. No escort. No stealth field. No fleet signature." Another ripple of laughter moved through the fleet. "A mistake," one commander said. "A suicide," another added. "A message of surrender, perhaps," someone joked. Kethrax's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. "Open a wideband channel," he said. "Let them speak before they die." The human ship did not respond. Instead, it moved. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just enough to place itself directly between the alien armada and the distant blue-green planet behind it, Haven. A young human colony. Barely protected. Barely armed. Barely noticed by the galaxy until now. "They place themselves as a shield," an officer said, amused. "With one ship." "Humans have always been dramatic," Kethrax replied. "Fire a warning volley. Minimal power." Energy lanced from 3 alien cruisers, precise and controlled. The beams struck empty space just ahead of the human vessel, close enough to turn the stars white. The human ship did not flinch. Silence stretched across the bridge. Then a signal arrived. "Transmission incoming," the comm officer said. "Human origin." On screen. The display filled with the image of a human man standing alone on a bare command deck. No decorations. No banners. No visible guards. He wore a plain dark uniform. His hair was short, his face tired, his eyes steady. "I am Commander Jonah Rook," he said calmly. "United Terran Vessel Resolve." More laughter. Louder now. "One ship named Resolve," someone mocked. "How poetic." Kethrax leaned forward. "You stand before the Caro's dominion," he said. "You are outnumbered 12,000 to 1. Speak quickly." Jonah Rook nodded once. "You're here to erase Haven." "Yes." "You believe this ship is all that stands in your way." "Yes." "You think that makes this easy." "Yes." Jonah allowed himself a small breath. Not a smile. Something quieter. "That's where you're wrong." The alien bridge erupted again. "End this," Kethrax said. "Fire." Weapons locked. Targeting systems aligned. Hundreds of ships prepared to strike at once. Then the sensor alarms screamed. "Unknown energy fluctuation. Spatial distortion detected. Source, human vessel." Before anyone could react, space around the Resolve bent. Not exploded, not burned, bent. Light warped. Distance folded. The stars behind it stretched like pulled fabric. "What is that?" Kethrax demanded. "We don't know," the sensor master said, panic creeping into his voice. "It's not a weapon signature. It's geometry failure." The human ship remained still. Jonah Rook spoke again, his voice now carried across every channel, every ship, every command deck. "You've spent thousands of years perfecting how to destroy worlds," he said. "We spent hours learning how to survive them." The distortion expanded outward, not violently, but inevitably. Alien targeting systems failed. Formation spacing collapsed. Communication lagged, then fractured. "This is impossible," an officer whispered. "One ship cannot." Jonah interrupted. "We call this a silence engine," he said. "It doesn't explode ships. It disconnects them, from each other, from time alignment, from command authority." Kethrak stood, his calm finally cracking. "Stop this." "We will," Jonah replied. "In a moment." The first alien cruiser vanished, not destroyed, not shattered, simply gone. No debris. No energy surge. 1 second it existed, the next it didn't. The laughter died. Panic spread faster than any weapon ever had. Fleet integrity collapsing. Multiple ships lost. Cannot re-establish formation. The armada that had arrived with absolute confidence now drifted in confusion, its perfect order unraveling. Jonah Rook's voice remained steady. "You mocked one human ship," he said, "because you believed power only comes in numbers." The distortion reached the front line of the fleet. Ships blinked out of existence, scattered into unreachable pockets of folded space. "This is not an attack," Jonah continued. "It's a warning." Kethrak stared at the display, his empire unraveling in real time. "Withdraw your fleet," Jonah said. "Leave this system. Forget this colony." "And if we refuse?" Kethrax asked, his voice low, desperate. Jonah looked directly into the camera. "Then the battlefield won't go silent," he said. "Because there won't be a battlefield left." The channel closed. The Resolve remained alone in space, small, scarred, unmoving. Behind it, a human colony waited. In front of it, an empire learned fear. And across the galaxy, something ancient shifted. Humanity had arrived, not with an army, but with an idea no one had prepared for. The Karo's dominion had a rule older than most suns: no retreat. Retreat was weakness. Weakness invited rebellion. And rebellion was cancer. Supreme Marshal Kethrax had executed entire bloodlines for less. Yet now, as ship after ship blinked out of existence, that ancient rule turned into a trap. On the throne bridge of the flagship Gravemind, alarms screamed in overlapping tones. The air smelled of heated crystal and nervous pheromones. Officers shouted numbers that made no sense. 18 ships lost. No, 27. Spatial anchors failing. Long-range weapons can't lock. Kethrak stood rigid, his claws digging into the armrest. His 4 eyes watched the tactical map where his perfect formation had become a broken scatter of icons, some drifting, some frozen, some simply gone. "What is the radius?" he demanded. The sensor master's voice trembled, expanding and contracting in pulses. "Like breathing." "A weapon that breathes," Kethrax growled. "Humans are diseased with theatrics." But the truth hit him hard. This was not theatrics. This was control. Clean, deliberate, and terrifyingly patient. The human ship Resolve sat like a dark nail hammered into space. It did not chase. It did not fire beams. It did not move at all. It waited. Kethrax turned to his war council. "Bring me an answer. Now." A tall strategist stepped forward, Admiral Vosk, known for cold logic and cruel efficiency. "Marshal," Vosk said, "the human device appears to disrupt our fleet cohesion. If we separate and jump independently." Another ship vanished. The tactical icon flickered once and disappeared. Vosk hesitated. "We may reduce total losses." Kethrax's gaze sharpened. "You're suggesting retreat." "I'm suggesting survival," Vosk replied, carefully choosing the most acceptable word. Kethrax hated that word in this moment. Survival was what prey did. The Dominion did not survive. It conquered. But as he watched a destroyer blink out, crew and all, he understood something he had never needed to understand before. If he insisted on pride, he would lose everything. "Hold position," Kethrax ordered instead, voice like stone. "No ship jumps without my command." The bridge fell silent. Even the alarms sounded smaller, like they knew they were not in control anymore. Then a new alert rang out, different from the others. "Marshal," the comm officer said, "we're receiving a transmission. Not from the human ship. From Ustra Haven. Kethrax's jaw tightened. They can transmit through our jamming. It's not normal signal, the officer answered. It's piggybacking off the distortion field. Kethrax felt something cold slip down his spine. Put it on. The screen flickered. A human woman appeared, standing in a crowded shelter. Behind her were frightened colonists, families, workers, children holding each other in shaking arms. She looked directly into the camera, eyes red, face pale, but voice firm. "This is Governor Mara Bell of Ustra Haven," she said. "To the Caro's fleet, you came here to make us afraid." She paused, swallowing hard. It worked. For a while. The colonists behind her listened, quiet and desperate. "But then one ship arrived," Mara continued, "and you laughed at it." Her lips tightened into something like anger. "I'm not a soldier. I'm not a fleet commander. I'm just someone trying to keep people alive. But I want you to understand this. Humans don't always win by being stronger." Kethrax stared, unsettled. This was not begging. This was not surrender. This was a statement. "We win by refusing to accept your story," Mara said. "You believe the galaxy has a natural order. You believe you're at the top. But the thing about humans is, we rewrite rules when the rules are killing us." Her eyes flicked to something off-screen. Then back to the camera. "So go ahead," she said quietly. "Tell yourselves that ship is a trick. Tell yourselves humans are weak. But if you stay, you're going to learn the hard way what happens when a stubborn species finally stops asking permission to exist." The transmission cut. For a moment, no one on the Gravemind spoke. Kethrax realized something else. The humans weren't just defending a colony. They were broadcasting this. They wanted the galaxy to see it. "Find the source of the human engine," Kethrax snapped. "If it breathes, it has a heart." The sensor master worked frantically. It's localized around the human ship, but the energy pattern doesn't match any known reactor. It's like multiple systems layered on top of each other. "Layered?" Kethrax hissed. "Yes, Marshal. Like they built redundancy into the impossible." Kethrax's claws clenched. That was human. Always that. Crude in appearance, brutal in function, and obsessively redundant. "Launch drones," he ordered. "Thousands. If weapons cannot lock, we will swarm it with eyes." Vosk nodded and relayed the command. From carrier bays across the fleet, drones poured out, small, fast, unmanned machines, each packed with scanners, each transmitting data back to the fleet. A cloud of metal insects raced toward the lone human vessel. The Resolve did not move. The distortion pulsed, subtle, like a heartbeat. As the first wave of drones entered the warped space, the sensor feeds filled with static. Some drones spun in impossible angles. Some folded inward like crushed paper. Some simply vanished. But not all. A few survived long enough to send images. The bridge screens filled with close-ups of the human hull, scarred plating, welded seams, repaired patches. It looked like a ship that had been broken and stitched back together too many times. Then the drones finally captured something else. A faint shimmer around the vessel, an invisible boundary where space itself bent like glass. "It's like a shell," Vosk murmured. "A field." "Not a shield," the sensor master corrected, stunned. "A spatial membrane." Kethrax leaned closer. "Can we pierce it?" The sensor master's voice was small. "Not with anything we have." That answer hit like a blade. The Dominion had never faced an enemy it could not outgun. Now it had. Kethrax forced his voice steady. "Then we change the battlefield." He turned toward weapons control. "Prime the gravity spears." Several officers froze. Gravity spears were Dominion relic weapons, ancient devices that could destabilize a planet's crust with targeted gravitational pulses. They were meant for punishment, not war. They were meant for making examples. Vosk blinked. "Marshal, if we use those." "We don't have to kill the colony," Kethrax said, low. "We only have to threaten it." He stared at the tactical map, the human ship still between them and Ustra Haven. If the human ship is an anchor, he continued, then the colony is their chain. His eyes narrowed with cruel clarity. We will show the humans what it means to protect something fragile. The officers moved to obey. Massive emitters across several capital ships began charging, building up dark energy that made instruments glitch. On the Resolve, alarms rang too. Commander Jonah Rook stood on his quiet bridge, watching the readouts. His crew did not shout. They didn't panic. They moved with practiced calm. Gravity spear charge detected, said Lieutenant Sarah Niam, the ship's tactical officer. They're aiming at the planet. Jonah's jaw tightened. Of course they are. Dr. Ilias Wren, the engineer responsible for the silence engine stability, stepped forward. His hands were shaking, but his voice stayed controlled. If those spears fire, Wren said, Ustra Haven could lose its oceans. Or its crust. Or both. Jonah stared at the enemy fleet. They can't hit us. So they'll hit what we love. He turned to comms. Open a channel. The screen flickered. Kethrax appeared again, eyes burning with regained confidence. Confidence borrowed from cruelty. Jonah spoke first. Don't. Kethrax's mandibles clicked with cold amusement. You cannot stop me. Jonah's voice was quiet. You think you found leverage. I found truth, Kethrax replied. You humans pretend you're fearless, but you build colonies. You raise children. You plant crops. You love. That makes you controllable. Jonah stared at him for a long moment. Then he said something that made the bridge behind him go still. You're right. Kethrax blinked, confused by the honesty. Jonah continued, voice calm but heavier now. We love. We build. We protect. That's why we're here. He took a breath. And that's why you're about to lose everything. Kethrax's eyes narrowed. Empty threats. Jonah shook his head once. Not a threat. A choice. He stepped closer to the camera. His eyes were tired, but steady like iron. We didn't bring one ship because it was enough to fight, Jonah said. We brought one ship because it was enough to end this. Kethrax's amusement twitched, just slightly. What does that mean? Jonah looked away for a fraction of a second, as if listening to someone off-screen. Then he looked back. It means the silence engine is only the first layer, Jonah said. Kethrax's throat tightened. First layer. Jonah's voice stayed simple. Humans don't bet everything on one miracle. He leaned in, and the next words landed like a death sentence. We build backups for our backups. Kethrax tried to speak, tried to command, tried to regain control. But his weapons officer shouted first. Marshal. The gravity spears. Charging is destabilizing. The distortion field is reacting. Kethrax's eyes snapped to the tactical map. The breathing distortion around the human ship changed. It widened. And for the first time, the Resolve moved. Not away. Forward. Straight into the heart of the Dominion fleet. And the battlefield, already shaking, prepared to go silent for real. The first thing the Caro's Dominion lost was order. As the human ship Resolve advanced, the distortion field around it stretched wider, swallowing space like a slow, deliberate tide. Navigation systems failed one by one. Ships drifted out of alignment, some colliding gently, others tearing themselves apart as gravity twisted in directions physics had never allowed. On the flagship Gravemind, Supreme Marshal Kethrax roared commands that no longer reached their targets in time. Pull the forward line back. Stabilize gravity anchors. Fire anyway, fire. Nothing behaved as it should. Weapons discharged half a second late, then half a second early. Energy beams curved. Missiles spiraled into empty space. The Dominion fleet, once a symbol of perfect discipline, now looked like a frightened herd trapped in a storm. And through it all, the human ship moved forward. Slowly. Calmly. Without urgency. Commander Jonah Rook stood on the bridge of the Resolve, hands resting lightly on the rail in front of him. His officers watched their screens, faces tight with focus. No cheers. No celebration. Just work. Outer distortion threshold expanding, Lieutenant Niam reported. They're losing cohesion faster than predicted. Dr. Wren swallowed. The second layer is activating naturally. Cascade synchronization is holding. Jonah nodded. Good. No one asked him if he was afraid. They all were. But fear had been addressed long before today. Fear had been measured, planned around, trained into something useful. Fear had been turned into discipline. On Ustra Haven, people watched the sky. They did not understand what they were seeing. Stars bent and dimmed. Alien ships blinked like dying lights. The night sky looked wounded. Governor Marabelle stood with a group of colonists on an open ridge, the air cold against her face. Children clutched their parents. Some cried. Others stared in stunned silence. Is it over? Someone asked. Mara shook her head slowly. No. But it's changing. Above them, the human ship moved, small even now, still absurdly alone, but something about it felt larger than before. Not in size. In presence. Back on the Gravemind, Kethrax felt something unfamiliar claw at his chest. Uncertainty. This is not a fleet tactic, Admiral Vosk said quietly. It's not even warfare as we understand it. Kethrax glared at the tactical map. Explain. Vosk hesitated. They are not attacking us directly. They are making it impossible for us to exist in the same rule space. Kethrax's mandibles clicked. You're saying the humans changed reality. I'm saying, Vosk replied carefully, that they found a way to punish superiority. Another ship vanished, this time a carrier, massive and ancient, gone without explosion or sound. Kethrax slammed his claws onto the console. How many? The sensor master answered in a hollow voice. We've lost 86 ships. Confirmed. Another 40 are non-responsive. One ship. Against hundreds. And winning. Marshal, Vosk said, lower now. We must disengage. Kethrax stared at the display. His empire had ruled for millennia because it never allowed weakness to be seen. Retreat was forbidden because retreat taught enemies hope. But hope was already spreading. The humans had already done that. Prepare a full system jump, Kethrax ordered at last. The words tasted like ash. Any ship that can jump, jump. A murmur passed through the bridge. Relief mixed with shame. Then the sensor master froze. Marshal, jump drives are not responding. Silence fell. What do you mean, not responding? Kethrax demanded. They're intact, the officer said, voice shaking. They're just not aligning. Space won't let them. Kethrax's eyes widened. On the resolve, Dr. Wren exhaled sharply. Third layer interference confirmed. They can't leave. Jonah closed his eyes for a brief moment. This was the line. The one they had hoped never to cross. Captain, Lieutenant Niam said softly. We're locking the entire battle space. Jonah opened his eyes. I know. He turned to communications. Open a channel. Dominion-wide. The signal cut through distorted space, carried by the same impossible geometry that was breaking the enemy fleet. Kethrax appeared on the screen, no longer calm, no longer amused. For the first time, a ruler of the Dominion looked small. What have you done? Kethrax demanded. Jonah spoke evenly. We isolated the system. You've trapped yourself as well. Yes, Jonah agreed. We did. Kethrax stared, trying to understand. Then this is mutual destruction. Jonah shook his head. No. He paused, choosing his words carefully. This is accountability. Kethrax's voice rose. You think killing my fleet will change the galaxy? Jonah's eyes hardened. We're not killing your fleet. That made Kethrax hesitate. We're removing it, Jonah continued. Every ship. Every weapon platform. Every command node. You cannot. We already are. Jonah gestured to the tactical feed. Your ships aren't exploding. They aren't dying. They're being displaced. Folded into isolated pockets of space where they can't hurt anyone. Kethrax's breath came fast now. You're imprisoning us. No, Jonah said quietly. We're ending your ability to choose violence as policy. Kethrax leaned closer to the screen. You call this mercy? Jonah didn't answer immediately. Then he said, mercy is what we wanted to show. Fear is what you taught us. Behind Jonah, the bridge crew worked in silence. Sweat beaded on foreheads. Hands shook slightly over controls. The engine was holding, but just barely. Dr. Wren spoke under his breath. We're approaching structural limits. The cascade won't hold forever. Jonah nodded. He had known that. Final layer, Jonah said. The crew stiffened. Lieutenant Niam looked at him. Captain, once we trigger it, there's no undo. I know. On the Gravemind, Kethrax saw the shift before anyone explained it. The distortion sharpened. The stars dimmed. What is that? He whispered. Jonah answered him anyway. It's a message, Jonah said. One you'll carry with you, wherever you end up. Kethrax felt something deep inside him break. Not fear, not rage, but understanding. You could have destroyed us, he said slowly. Yes. You chose not to. Yes. Why? Jonah looked away, just for a moment. Then back. Because if we become you, he said, then the galaxy doesn't need saving anymore. The human ship glowed, not with light, but with absence. Space folded inward, carefully, deliberately, like a closing hand. One by one, the remaining Dominion ships vanished. No fire. No sound. No final scream. Just silence. When it was over, the system felt lighter. On Ustra Haven, the stars returned to normal. People cried. Some laughed. Some fell to their knees without knowing why. Governor Marabelle wiped her eyes. They're gone, she whispered. In the emptiness where an armada had stood, only one ship remained. The Resolve drifted, its engines flickering. On its bridge, alarms finally screamed. Dr. Wren shouted, Cascade collapse. We're losing containment. Jonah grabbed the rail as the ship shuddered. Lieutenant Niam looked at him, eyes wide. Captain, if the engine fails. Jonah nodded slowly. I know. He looked at the stars, calm again, innocent again. Bring us about, he said. Let's go home. The ship groaned, wounded but alive, turning away from the silence it had created. Behind it, an empire was gone. Ahead of it, the galaxy was watching. And humanity had just taught the universe a lesson it would never forget. The Resolve did not leave the system in triumph. It limped. Its engines flickered between stable and failure, each pulse of thrust sounding like a wounded breath. Hull plates glowed dull red in places, warped by forces no ship had ever been meant to survive. Inside, gravity fluctuated just enough to make walking feel uncertain, like the deck itself was unsure whether it still believed in down. Commander Jonah Rook stayed on the bridge. Not because protocol demanded it, but because leaders stayed visible when the cost came due. Containment level, he asked. Dr. Ilias Wren wiped sweat from his brow, hands flying over readouts. 48% and falling. The cascade didn't just bend space, it scarred it. We're riding turbulence that shouldn't exist. Time estimate? Jonah asked. Wren hesitated. For what? Jonah gave a small, tired smile. For consequences. No one laughed. Lieutenant Niam broke the silence. Long-range sensors are lighting up. Multiple signatures. Not Dominion design. Jonah's jaw tightened. Observers. Yes, she said. A lot of them. They had known this would happen. The moment the Dominion fleet vanished, the galaxy would notice. Ancient empires didn't disappear quietly. Power left a vacuum, and the universe hated vacuums. On Ustra Haven, celebrations had turned into something quieter. People hugged. People cried. Fires were lit, not in victory, but in warmth. The colony still stood, untouched, alive. Yet beneath the relief ran a deeper current, fear of what came next. Governor Marabelle stood in the colony's command hall, watching reports flood in from across human space. "They're asking questions," her advisor said softly. "Everyone is." "Let them," Mara replied. "Some aren't asking politely." Mara nodded. "They never do." Back aboard the Resolve, a new transmission arrived. This one was different, clean, precise, heavily encoded. "Origin?" Jonah asked. "Multispecies relay," Niam replied. "Council weight encryption." Jonah exhaled slowly. "Put it through." The screen filled with a circle of figures, tall, small, scaled, furred, mechanical. Representatives of species that had survived by avoiding notice. Species that had bent, hidden, complied. A thin, pale alien with luminous eyes spoke first. "You erased the Caro's dominion." Jonah shook his head. "No. We stopped them." "That distinction may not survive politics," another voice said. Jonah met their gazes calmly. "We didn't come here to be liked." A murmur passed through the council. "You demonstrated a capability no known power possesses," the first speaker continued. "That makes humanity destabilizing." Jonah folded his hands behind his back. So was fire. So was flight. So was the idea that empires could fall. Silence followed. Finally, a metallic voice spoke. "What do you want?" Jonah answered honestly. "To be left alone." Some of the figures reacted with surprise. Others with suspicion. "You do not behave like a species seeking isolation," the metallic voice observed. Jonah nodded. "We behave like one that learned isolation doesn't protect you." Another speaker leaned forward. "Will you use this weapon again?" Jonah's eyes flicked briefly to Dr. Wren, still fighting to keep the engine stable. "We hope not," Jonah said. "It nearly killed us." "That does not answer the question." Jonah's voice hardened just a little. "We will use it again if someone tries to erase us. Or anyone under our protection." The council went quiet. They had expected arrogance. They had received resolve. The transmission ended without ceremony. On the Resolve, Dr. Wren finally looked up. "Captain, the engine won't survive another activation. Not even a fraction." Jonah nodded. "I know." "Then what we did today was all we ever planned to do," Jonah finished. The ship shuddered again. A warning light went dark, then another. Lieutenant Niam spoke carefully. "Emergency repair teams are reporting structural fatigue. We're holding together, but barely." Jonah looked at his crew. Every face was exhausted. Every eye carried the same unspoken thought. Was it worth it? He answered without speaking. "Set course for home," he said. "Slow. Gentle." The Resolve turned, inch by inch, leaving behind a system that would be studied for centuries. Behind it, far beyond Haven, something else stirred. In the dark between stars, the remnants of the Dominion's displaced fleet drifted in fractured pockets of space, alive, isolated, powerless. Commanders screamed orders no one could hear. Soldiers waited for rescue that would never come. Supreme Marshal Kethrax floated alone in a shattered command chamber. Gravity gone, pride gone, certainty gone. For the first time in his long life, no enemy stood before him. Only consequence. He thought of Jonah Rook's words. Accountability. The word burned. Across the galaxy, reactions spread like ripples. Some species quietly dismantled invasion plans. Some accelerated weapons research. Some sent envoys toward human space, curious, cautious, afraid. And some watched Earth with something dangerously close to hope. Humanity had not claimed the throne of the galaxy, but it had shattered the idea that thrones were permanent. On the Resolve, as systems stabilized just enough to keep them alive, Jonah finally allowed himself to sit. Lieutenant Niam approached him quietly. "Captain, Do you think this changes things? Jonah looked out at the stars. Yes, he said. But not the way people think. How so? They'll focus on the weapon, Jonah replied. On the engine. On how we did it. He turned to face her. They'll miss the point. And the point is. Jonah smiled faintly, tired but certain. That we didn't ask permission. The Resolve slipped into transit, wounded but returning. Human space waited. And somewhere beyond known charts, forces older than the Dominion had begun to pay attention. Because now they knew something they had never known before. Humanity could say no. The galaxy did not explode into chaos the way many had expected. It paused. Across thousands of star systems, fleets slowed their patrols. Expansion councils postponed votes. Military academies rewrote simulations that no longer made sense. For the first time in recorded galactic history, power hesitated, not because it had been defeated everywhere, but because it had been defeated once, publicly, and without spectacle. The silence left behind by the Caro's Dominion was louder than any war. The Resolve returned to human space 3 weeks later. Not to celebration. Not to parades. To doctors. Engineers. Quiet handshakes. Long stares from people who understood that something fundamental had shifted. The ship barely held together during the final jump. When it emerged from transit above Earth's outer defense ring, its engines failed completely. It drifted, powerless, until tugs pulled it into orbit. Jonah Rook stood on the bridge until the last system shut down. Only then did he sit. On Earth, leaders argued for days before deciding what to do next. Some demanded secrecy. Some demanded dominance. Some wanted to dismantle the silence engine and pretend it had never existed. Humanity had always been divided that way. Jonah was called before the assembly, not as a hero, but as a witness. You ended an empire, one delegate said. Jonah corrected them calmly. We stopped an attack. You used a weapon no one can counter. We used a consequence, Jonah replied. The assembly chamber went quiet. You could rule the galaxy, another voice said. Jonah looked up, tired eyes steady. We don't want to rule anyone. Then what do you want? Jonah thought of Astra Haven. Of frightened children staring at a sky full of enemies. Of a galaxy that had never asked whether humans deserved to exist. We want the right to say no, he said. And to have that no mean something. The silence engine was dismantled within the year. Not destroyed, archived. Sealed. Under layers of oversight so heavy it bordered on fear. Humanity understood the danger of what it had built. But it also understood something else. Some ideas could not be unlearned. Astra Haven rebuilt quietly. No monuments were raised. No statues cast. The people there planted new fields, expanded schools, named a small park after a ship most of them would never see again. They called it Resolve Park. Out in the void, the scattered remnants of the Dominion fleet remained lost. Some crews survived for years in isolation before surrendering to passing traders. Others faded into myth, ghost ships drifting in impossible space. Supreme Marshal Kethrax was eventually recovered by a neutral salvage guild. He was older, thinner, quieter. When asked what defeated the Dominion, he answered with a single sentence. Humans refused to play the role we assigned them. That quote spread faster than any battle report. Centuries later, young species would study the event not as a war, but as a turning point. A moment when the galaxy learned that power was not just numbers, age, or fear. It was choice. The Resolve never flew again. Its hull was too damaged, its systems too altered. It was placed in orbit above Earth, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. Schoolchildren would look up at it someday and ask what it had done. And someone would answer. It stood alone so others wouldn't have to. The galaxy did not become peaceful overnight. But it became careful. And that was enough. Because somewhere, deep in the shared memory of every species that watched that battle unfold, one truth remained. If humanity ever sent only one ship again, it would not be a joke.